Well, here we are. Friday, June 24th, 2022. I'm Larissa. Got my cup of coffee. It's morning time. Brody's here with one of his busted balls. Brody, I'm not touching that. I don't have to chuck it, number one. And number two, it's not even a whole ball. It's a busted ball. Mummy's not throwing a busted ball. No, I'm not. So, patent leather jean. Patent leather jean, 2020 Lenten season novella, an original work of fiction by Larissa Dahroug. I called it a novella, but it's not. It's a full-length novel. A novella is like 100 pages or less. I've read a couple. They're hard to do. They're longer than a short story, but they're shorter than a novel. I think the novella is probably the most difficult thing to write. Some people say a short story is. Some people do a lot of things, huh? Anyway, patent leather jean. Chapter 8. It's kind of a little business. Pat turned away from Gertrude while she was in mid-sentence. He couldn't look at the woman 1 second longer without striking her, and Pat wasn't one to hit a woman. He knew she had something to do with what was wrong with his boy. Connor still did whatever Pat asked of him, but when he was home these days, he took his frozen dinners and hid in his bedroom. It had been years since Pat had tried making a home-cooked meal, but until Connor had started working for Gertrude, he at least used to sit at the table with his father. Pat was beside himself. Dinner with his son had been the last remnant of the normal family life he had shared with his wife, and he missed it more than he realized. Maybe if you came out of your house now and then and interacted with the world like a normal human being, your son wouldn't be so fucked up. The sound of Gertrude's crackling old woman voice trailed off behind Pat as he trod up the street back towards his home. As Pat reached the foot of his driveway, Connor pulled up on his bike, hopped off, and walked to the front door with his father in silence. Old Pat dug around in his front right pocket for the key and opened the door. Connor slid in behind him with the bike and tucked it against the wall just inside the front sitting room of the disheveled house. "Well, it's about time you came home, boy," Pat muttered at Connor. The two men headed for the kitchen instinctively. "You hungry?" Pat asked as he opened the freezer and pulled out 2 Stouffer's frozen mac and cheese dinners. "Yeah, I could eat one of those," Connor replied and sat down at the table, pulling out his cell phone, scrolling through something on the screen, while Pat peeled up the corners of the containers and turned the oven on to preheat. "I hear you were chatting with Gert, Dad. You guys dating now?" Connor joked in an ambivalent tone. Pat opened the oven door and snorted as he placed the 2 frozen meals on the shelf. He closed the oven door with a snap and turned to look at his son, who was still engrossed with whatever was on the screen of his phone. "I beg your pardon?" Pat cocked his head to one side, then lurched forward, smacking the phone from his son's hands. Connor was shocked. His father hadn't been physical with him since he was 13 and had complained about his new glove not being the one he really wanted. Pat had been between jobs at the time and money had been tight. The purchase of the glove had been a hardship, and Gloria had given up coffee, her only extravagance, for more than 3 weeks to make room in the budget for her son's desire to play ball. It was the only time Pat had ever struck the boy, and he had beaten the crap out of him, leaving Connor with a black eye and bruised ribs. They didn't speak for a month, and Connor had never complained about his gear again. Gloria had cried herself to sleep for a week after. Pat vowed to her that he would never strike the boy again. Now in the kitchen, frozen dinners in the oven, and Gloria long dead, Pat stared his startled son down, reconsidering his vow. "Boy, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but in case you haven't noticed, you look like you could be Mrs. Donovan's boyfriend these days. Are you sick or what?" Pat coldly asked his son. Connor was scared. Pat could take him. They both knew it. I'm just not all that hungry most days. I guess I miss Mom." Connor stammered and picked up his phone from the floor where it had landed. The screen was cracked. He stuffed the thing in his pocket and looked away from his father. "Bullshit. Why do you miss her any more today than you did a year ago when you still looked like a young man? Are you sick? Do you need to see a doctor?" Pat asked again, the volume of his voice raising as the tone dropped deeper. Connor looked at his hands in his lap. He knew his father was right. He could see he didn't look good. He wasn't blind. I don't know, Dad. I'll try to eat more. He turned his hands over in his lap, considering his bony wrists. And just what all do you do for that psychedelic widow down there anyway? She said something about taking out her trash and mowing her lawn. What else do you do for her, and what is she paying you? Pat pressed his son for details. I don't know, Dad. Yeah, I mow the lawn, and I take out her trash, and sometimes I change her cat's litter boxes or fix the screen door. That kind of shit. She doesn't have a kid of her own, you know, and it's none of your business what she pays me. I'll decide what is and isn't my business around here as long as you aren't paying me any rent. I want to know what she pays you and just what you're spending it on. Is that a new bike out there? It looks kind of girly, don't you think? Aw, come on, Dad. She pays me like $50 or something, and the bike's not new. It's used. I traded my old one with a guy at the park the other day. For that? You traded your old bike for that one? What the hell was wrong with the other one? Or the one before that? Why are you trading bikes all the time with some guy at the park? And who the hell is this guy at the park? Shit doesn't add up, Connor. Shit just doesn't add up here. Connor got up and tried to leave the table, but Pat blocked him from doing so. You just sit your ass back down right there. We're going to have a conversation and eat this meal together, and you're going to give me some answers, or there's going to be rent to pay. Do you understand me? My pension pays for everything you see here, and it doesn't go as far as it used to these days. Connor sat back down as his father had instructed him. Jeez. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you're sorry, all right. A sorry sack of shit. Now, what's going on with the bikes? Connor sighed and looked at the table in front of him as he answered Pat. It's kind of a little business I have. I buy beat-up old bikes from this guy, Sid, down at the park, and fix them up and sell them to a shop out in Royal Oak for up to 3 times what I get them for from Sid. This was mostly a lie. The truth was, Sid and Connor stole the bikes. Then Connor fixed anything they broke in the process of stealing them and repainted them down in Gertrude's backyard. Then he and Sid put them in the back of Sid's van and sold them to a shop off Main near the post office in Royal Oak and another one out near the Heidelberg Project. It was a pretty good little business they had going. They pulled in anywhere from $300 to $1,000 every week and split it 50-50. The bike Connor had to work on right now was, in fact, a girl's bike. The shop in Royal Oak had specifically requested a couple girls' bikes. Connor was going to airbrush a unicorn on this one. Details like that bumped up the price, and he could get by at least 40%. Between the bikes and selling the pills Gert gave him for the little errands he ran for her, Connor was able to support his meth habit, pay for his phone, and buy beer. Until now, Pat had never shown any interest. The timer on the stove dinged and shook both men out of their trance. Pat grabbed an oven mitt and pulled out the steaming boxes of mac and cheese, sitting them on the thick paper plates before bringing them to the table. He sat one at his place and one in front of Connor, who got up and grabbed a couple forks from the drying rack next to the sink. He handed one to his father as they both sat down. Pat bowed his head. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Pat recited without even thinking about it. Connor waited until his father finished before carefully peeling open the box meal and taking a bite. Pat took a couple bites while watching his son lift the fork to his mouth. Connor's teeth were looking pretty bad. So this Sid and this bike business, when did this start? Where's this Sid from? Pat inquired skeptically. Oh, we've been working together for about a year now. I met him at the park one day when I was out looking for work, Connor lied. He never went to the park except for when he was looking to score some meth. He met Sid a few years ago at a show at the Phoenix Center. He just happened to see Sid steal some chick's purse and for some reason decided to cover for him. When the bouncer went after him, Connor had nonchalantly extended his right foot and tripped the obese fuck as he ran past him after Sid. Connor then followed Sid out of the venue and onto the street and demanded a cut for his assistance. Sid had laughed as they slipped down an alley and dumped out the contents of the bag. $30 and some change, a coin for the people mover, a gas card, and a Swiss Army knife. The two guys had marveled at how she had gotten the knife past the door check. Looking for work at the park, eh? Pat licked some noodle from his incisor. He wasn't buying it, but wasn't going to call his son out just yet. So how much how much you buy these bikes for from Sid? Connor chewed slowly and looked at his dad. It varies, like $30 to $50 depending on what they are and how messed up they are. It was plausible given the story he had told about his deal with Gert. Yeah? And then how much do you sell them to the shop for, and what do they sell them for? Connor was actually kind of enjoying this shop talk with his dad. It almost felt like a normal conversation, and they hadn't had one of those since before his mother died. Like I said before, it varies. If the bike is something special, and I've done a cool paint job, I've gotten as much as $250, but usually it's $75 to $100. The last fancy one I did sold out of the store for almost $1,000. Connor said, pleased with himself. $1,000? Why don't you just sell the bikes yourself? We could get your cousin Elizabeth to make you a website. You're throwing money away selling them to this shop. We could use that income around here. Maybe hire a cleaning service to get this place straightened up. Pat was flabbergasted. He had no idea his son even had these skills, let alone that kind of money in his pocket. Where are you working on these bikes? Because it sure as hell ain't in my garage. Connor felt a little nervous now at his father's unexpected support. Well, I don't really want to sell them myself. Then I'd have to keep inventory. The shop has clients already. Mrs. Donovan lets me use her husband's old shop in the backyard to work on them. Gertrude's late husband, Felix, had liked to work on cars in his spare time. He did custom paint jobs on the side for extra cash. One day, Gertrude had sent Connor out to the garage to poke around for some tools to fix a kitchen cabinet, and he saw the bench and the airbrush machine and asked her about it. She had told him he was welcome to use the shop after he was done doing chores and odd jobs for her. So far, it had been working out well. He kept the stolen merchandise out of his house and in an unsuspected yet safe place. Gertrude hardly ever left the house except with that bitchy friend of hers, Joan. Pat and Felix had been in a bowling league together back in the day at Rochester Bowl. Well, they hadn't really been friends. They had been friendly. So Pat didn't think anything of it. Connor saw the belief on his father's face and relaxed a bit, taking another bite of mac and cheese. Oh, well, you're probably right about that there. Having an inventory of bikes here would probably just invite thieves. Pat shoveled the last bite of mac and cheese into his face and wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist as he pushed up out of his chair. He tossed the empty container and used plate in the trash and gave his fork a quick rinse in the sink and placed it back in the drying rack. Then he turned to the fridge and opened it, bending over to look at the bottom shelf. So these bikes are where you been getting beer money then? Pat said as he turned from the refrigerator, closing the door behind him, popping the tab on a can of PBR. Sounds like you'd be buying something a little better than PBR, son, Pat said with some amount of approval in his voice. Connor smiled. It was the first time in a long time his father had any amount of approval for him in his voice. What do you mean? You order PBR when we go to the bar, Connor laughed. Well, yeah, I'm a cheap date, but here in the castle it'd be nice to have something a little more highbrow, like maybe some bells or something. Pat took a long swig from the can. You want one, boy? He asked his son, holding the can up slightly. Yeah, sure, Connor said. Pat turned back around and grabbed a can from the refrigerator and tossed it across the room to Connor, who simply raised his arm and grabbed it out of the air. See there? You still got it, my boy, just like catching everything that Billy Swanson from Auburn Hills hit at you. Connor blushed. Pat belched and patted his stomach as he sat back down next to his son. Connor cracked the beer, and Pat bumped cans with him. To your mother, he announced. To Mom, Connor toasted in return. Pat finished the beer and swiped up Connor's now finished plate and fork from the table while Connor took a drink of his. Next time you take a bike down to this shop, I'd like to come along, Pat told his son. Connor almost snarfed the beer he had in his mouth out his nose. I don't think that'd be a good idea, Dad. What? Why not? I won't say anything. I'd just like to see some of your work. Sid doesn't like people in his van other than me. That's fine. I'll follow down behind you guys. What's the shop called? Seriously, Dad, it's not a good idea. The guy who buys the bikes doesn't even really like me. He says he just sells more of my bikes than anyone else's. He said if my paint jobs weren't so good, he'd take me out back and knock some sense into me or something like that. This was not a lie. Dirk from the shop in Royal Oak had told him that more than once, and he believed him. Dirk didn't have patience for tweakers like him and Sid. Oh, well, at least show me this bike you have out there by the door when you're done with it before you sell it, Pat requested jovially. Connor smiled. Sure thing, Pop, he said, and finished his beverage. Connor got up and headed for the bike in the other room. Pat belched again and called after him. Hey, where are you off to now? You want to watch the Tigers with me here in a bit? Maybe drink a couple more beers with your old man? It was the first time since Connor's 21st birthday that Pat had invited his son to drink with him or watch a game. Connor almost said yes. Sorry, Pop, I have a bit of a deadline. I gotta get this thing down to Mrs. Donovan's place and get started. Maybe next time then, son, Pat said, and shooed his boy with his hand as he walked out the door. Pat smiled to himself, thinking maybe that old bat Gertrude was right. Maybe it was time. he started to get out more. Brody! Brody, it's enough! Anyway, Connor pushed the bike to the end of the driveway and hopped on, heading to Gertrude's house. She had told him not to come around for a while. But this bike was a special order. He needed to get started. Plus, Sid had 2 more girls' bikes waiting in the wings for him to refinish. He hadn't helped lift those 2, just this one. Shelby Township had been easy pickings last week, Sid told him. He said something about those farm folks out there not even locking their garages at night, and that the first 2 houses he hit had exactly what they were looking for. Connor didn't care. He'd been thinking about telling Sid he wasn't interested in helping him steal the bikes anymore. He just wanted to do the refurb work. He was also thinking he wanted to ask Gertrude for a raise. The last thing with the dog shit had been gross, and besides, he didn't have anything against Jean and Robin. They had always been nice to him and his family, and Jean made really good cake. He wasn't sure why Gertrude and her friend Joan hated Jean, but lesbians didn't make sense to him in general, unless they were young, cute, and willing to let him watch, which none of them that he had known ever were. The one time he walked in on Gertrude and Joan kissing and groping each other, he had thrown up in his mouth a little, but that might have just been because he hadn't had his fix yet. Joan had grabbed his arm hard enough to leave a bruise and told him if he told anyone what he saw, she would cut his nuts off, and he believed her. Joan was mean. Gertrude was crotchety a lot of the time, but Joan was just plain mean. He didn't like her, and she didn't like him. He kind of felt bad for Gert, and if he hadn't seen her and Joan going at it, he might have suggested his dad ask her out for lunch sometime. Connor pulled the bike around to Gertrude's back door and propped it up against the siding and let himself in with the key she had given him a couple weeks before. The litter needed changed. There was a new bag on the floor behind the door. He bent down to start the dirty job, and one of Gertrude's cats darted out of the box. Gertrude yelled from deep in the house, "Joan, is that you?" "No, Gert, it's me. I'm here to change the litter for you," Connor offered hopefully. "Connor? Your fuddy-duddy of an old man was down here earlier looking for you and giving me a hard time. Besides, I told you not to come around for a while." Connor could hear Gertrude's footsteps and tell by the sound of her voice she was coming back to talk to him. He stood up with the litter scooper in one hand, waiting for her. In a moment, she was standing in front of him with one of her sauced-up bottles of Crystal Light. "I'm sorry, Gert, I know what you said, but you need my help. You can't do this, and God knows Joan ain't going to do it for you." Connor smiled at Gertrude sympathetically. Gertrude softened at his genuine affection. She knew he was right, and she was grateful for the help. She and Felix had never been able to have any children, and it had never really bothered her until he passed away and was reminded of his absence every time she couldn't bend over to pick something up, or needed to go to the store, or the grass needed cut around her precious roses. The doctor had told her before Felix had ever gotten sick that she needed to have her hip replaced, but she wasn't interested in being cut up and pinned back together. What her methadone didn't take care of, the vodka did, and what those things didn't cover, Joan or Connor did. In a strange way, she realized she loved Connor. Gertrude sighed and pat the boy on the arm. "Oh, Connor, you're right, but if Joan comes over, you'll need to go. Does your dad know you're okay? He was worried. If I'd known where you were, I would have told him." Gertrude turned back towards her kitchen. Connor resumed cleaning up the cat litter mess. "Yeah, I just had lunch with him. I told him about the bikes. He knows I'm down here." He spoke loudly, so she could hear him in the other room while he worked. There were a total of 4 litter boxes, and Gertrude had at least 11 cats. A few years ago, she had almost 30, but animal services had been called by the next-door neighbor, and they had taken all but 4. Now she was back up to 11 or 12. Connor couldn't be sure. He just knew it was a whole lot of cat shit. "You told him about the bikes? Damn it, now he'll be down here looking for you all the time," Gertrude said from the kitchen. Connor thought he could smell cookies or something baking. "No, he won't. Hey, are you baking something in there?" Gertrude made pretty good chocolate chip cookies, and Connor liked cookies. "I have some of those cookies you like in the oven right now. They're almost done. You can have a couple when you're done in there," Gertrude told him. "Great, thanks. Hey, you have more than this one bag of litter here? You know each box takes 1 bag. "Yeah, I have 3 more bags in the sitting room. Come get them." "I will. I'm just going to take these out back and spray them out first." "Okay, sounds good," Gertrude said just as the buzzer went off for the stove. Even over the pungent stink of cat pee and shit, Connor's mouth watered. as the smell of the cookies wafted into the utility room from the kitchen. He took the litter boxes out one by one and dumped the used litter into the trash, then laid the boxes and their lids on the cracked patio so he could spray them out with the hose. Then he went back in to sweep the loose litter from the floor while the boxes dried in the sun. He entered the kitchen and saw the cookies on the counter cooling, with one of Gertrude's cats sitting next to them, looking at them. The cat knew they were hot. He shooed the giant tabby from the counter and headed to the sitting room where he found Gertrude crocheting, her sauced-up crystal light on the table, and the Tigers game on the TV. The opening pitch had just been thrown. He thought about his dad down at their house watching the game and drinking alone too, and thought it was sad they couldn't all be doing what they were doing right now, but together, like a family. He looked from Gertrude to the screen and felt a pang of jealousy for the pitcher on the mound. It was an away game. It should be him on that mound. Gertrude saw the look on his face and felt pity for the boy. With her crochet hook, she pointed at the bags of litter by the front door. "There's the litter, Connor." "Yeah, I see it." Connor snapped out of his sad daydream and headed for the bags. As he lifted all three up in his arms awkwardly, he looked at Gertrude again. "Hey, Gert," he started. "What's that, dear?" Gertrude replied sweetly. "Gert, are you like a total lesbo, or do you still like dicks too?" he asked her, surprising even himself at his boldness. "Now, what the hell kind of question is that?" Gert laughed. Connor shifted his weight and balanced the bags of litter. "Oh, I didn't mean to," he started, but Gertrude interrupted him. "Oh, it's okay. No, I'm not a total lesbo. I'm bi. I just happen to love Joan." The old woman laughed again and took a drink from her bottle. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, I don't know. I just see you up here watching the game and having a drink. My dad down there watching the game and drinking beer, and..." Gertrude interrupted him again. "And you thought we could all be broken together." Gertrude smiled and Connor blushed. "Well, yeah, I guess. Something like that." "Connor, your father wouldn't touch me with a 10-foot pole. He reminded me this morning that I'm not half the woman his Gloria was, and he's right. I'm not. I could never fill in for your mom, but you can consider me like an aunt if that makes you feel better." It did make Connor feel better. "Yeah, can I call you Aunt Gert then?" Connor's mother had been an only child, and his father's family lived in Alberta. While they got Christmas cards from them every year, they never saw them, not even at his mother's funeral. "Sure, sweetie, you can call me Aunt Gert. I think I like that." And she did. Gertrude's sister died a few years before Felix, and her kids were snobby. Alice had married into Grosse Pointe money, and Gertrude and Felix had never been invited for holidays or anything else. The only time any of Alice's family wanted anything to do with her was when her husband Steve's brother, Jack, wanted his Bel Air redone for the Dream Cruise a year before Felix got sick. It was the last car Felix had painted, and he had charged Jack twice what he would have charged anyone else, not because he needed or wanted the money, but to, in some small way, make up for the hurt the snubbing had caused Gertrude over the years. Gertrude loved her sister and missed her company and friendship. Felix had been like that. Gertrude had told Joan once he was a man of principle. Joan said he was just an asshole. Joan was wrong, and Gertrude understood why Joan felt that way. She was jealous. Joan was jealous of the spot Felix held in Gertrude's heart, and the fact that she had actually loved him and wanted to be his wife, unlike Joan, who had always only been attracted to women and hid it to appease her parents. The two women argued about this from time to time. It hurt Gertrude, but sometimes Felix had hurt her feelings too. Love was love, no matter what, dick or no dick. Connor passed by Gertrude with the bags of litter. "Thanks, Aunt Gert." "You're welcome," she said to his back as he disappeared through the kitchen to finish changing the cat litter. "Don't forget to have a couple of those cookies when you're done, and bring me one too." "No problem, Aunt Gert," Connor yelled back from the utility room. Connor brought the bottoms of the 4 boxes back into the small room and arranged them the way the cats were accustomed and filled them each with a bag of litter. Then he retrieved the lids and swept up the loose litter that hadn't made it into any box before he went into the kitchen and washed his hands. The tabby was back on the counter looking at the cookies. "Aunt Gert, one of your cats is in here on the counter with the cookies," he yelled to the front room. "Oh, that's Sheba. She won't touch them. She just likes to look at them for some reason. Cookies and bread both. She sits and watches them on the counter," Gertrude explained over the sound of the game. Connor reached out and rubbed the cat's ears. "Good Sheba. Make sure no one steals Aunt Gert's cookies." The cat pressed her head into his hand and purred. Connor pulled a couple paper towels from a roll next to the sink and put 2 cookies on either one. With 2 cookies in either hand, he walked back into the sitting room and sat on the chair next to the couch where Gertrude was seated and placed 1 paper towel with cookies on the table next to her drink. Then he took a bite of one of his cookies and looked at the TV. Still warm, he mumbled with his mouth full. Gertrude picked up a cookie and shoved half of it in her mouth all at once. She agreed. Connor slowly enjoyed his cookies for 15 minutes or so and watched the game in silence with his Aunt Gert. When he was done, he stood up. "I'm going to go work in the shop for a bit, Aunt Gert." "Okay, sweetie, be a dear and lock the back door on your way out, and stay as long as you like, unless Joan shows up. If she comes over, don't let her see you. Just slip away when she's not looking." "Okay, Aunt Gert, and what, dear?" Gertrude asked softly. "And thank you, Aunt Gert. I love you." "I love you too, sweetie." Connor turned quickly and did as he was told. Gertrude wept quietly after she heard the back door lock. Chapter 9. It's Gonna Sell Out. Myers was a zoo, and Robin and Jean almost had a fender bender in the parking lot leaving the store. 2 older women, one in a late 90s Cadillac and the other in a Toyota Prius, were both trying to pull into the same handicap space and nearly collided. Then, when the Cadillac backed up to avoid hitting the Prius, she almost backed into the Grand Cherokee before Robin had even turned the key in the ignition. Robin vowed to never shop at the store again, but Jean reminded him. He said that almost every time they made a trip to the store together. Robin sighed as he looked at the 2 older women yelling at each other in his rearview mirror and was reminded of his mother. Everything seemed to make him think of his mother these days. It was starting to get on his nerves and make him avoidant of older women in general. When they were checking out, he had made Jean wait in a long line just to avoid an older woman cashier at a register that opened just as they approached the checkout area. When Jean protested, he pretended to not hear her. Now back at the house, Robin brought the last bag of groceries in from the car and sat it on the kitchen counter while Jean was busy putting things away. "Did you not want to use that checkout lane because of the cashier?" Jean asked Robin without looking up, trying to fit things in the pantry. Robin was startled by her observation. "Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just all this shit with my mom has me seeing her everywhere I look. I can't stand old women right now," he explained. It never ceased to amaze him how Jean always seemed to know these things about him, often before he had even figured it out himself. But this time, he knew what was going on. "Well, I can understand where you're coming from, but do you realize not all old women are like your mom or Gertrude, right? I mean, it's not fair to write off all old women just because your mom's nuts," Jean pressed. After all, one day she would be an old woman. Was he going to avoid her once he decided she was an old woman too? "I know. Don't get on me about it right now, okay? I just want to lie down. I'm tired." Robin walked over to Jean and kissed her brow. Jean touched Robin's face and watched him lumber to the living room to lie down on the couch. She heard the TV flick on and an announcer say something about the Tigers' lineups and stats. Jean backed up against the counter, spreading her weight to either hand outstretched on either side of her against the edge of the granite countertop, and looked over the center island into the dining room. The light was cutting through the room at an obtuse angle, illuminating the 4 chairs at the dining room table that remained empty unless they had company. She looked to her left and saw the photo from Robin's 40th birthday hanging on the fridge. Joan was seated next to Jean at the table, glaring an expression of disapproval at her. The waiter had taken it just moments before the incident that caused Robin to demand his mother and Gertrude to leave. Jean's eyes welled up with tears. She cried silently as she finished putting the last few things away: a block of cheese, some mayo, orange juice, pickles, beer. Then she grabbed a tumbler from the cabinet and poured herself a finger of vodka over a couple ice cubes and topped it off with some peach-flavored seltzer they had just brought home that wasn't cold yet. She took a sip and sat the drink on the counter island, then splashed her face with cold water and pat it dry with a fresh paper towel. "You want a beer?" she called to Robin in the other room. "Yeah, sure, that'd be great. One of those new IPAs we just got would hit the spot." Jean opened the refrigerator and grabbed a bottle with what looked like an artichoke flying through space on the label and popped it open. She dug in a cupboard under the island and produced a large aluminum bowl and filled it with half a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips. Then she balanced the bowl on her left forearm with her drink in her left hand and grabbed Robin's beer with the right hand and headed into the living room to join her husband. In the living room, Robin was stretched out on his side, with his head propped up with both a pillow and his arm. There was a hole in the toe of his sock. Jean was always telling him to throw away such socks, and let her know so she could pick up some new ones. Hell, they were just at Meyer. They could have grabbed a couple pair then if she had known. Jean sat the open beer and the bowl of chips on the table in front of her husband and settled herself with a drink in the chair next to the sofa where guests usually sat. Robin propped himself up to sitting and snatched his beer and a handful of chips from the table. "What you drinking?" he asked her, stuffing the chips in his mouth and taking a swig of beer. "Vodka and seltzer," she answered flatly. Robin frowned a little. He could tell she'd been crying. Her eyelashes were stuck together a little and her eyes looked pinkish. "What's wrong, babe?" he inquired. Jean's eyes welled up again, but she held the tears back. "Nothing. Well, nothing that has any answer or quick fix. I guess I'm just tired too," she answered as she wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and took a sip of her drink. "Aw, come on," Robin pressed. "Aw, come on, nothing. You told me not to get on you about it, so I'm not. Look, I know she's your mother, but this is real hard on me too, you know. Just watch the game. It's okay. It's not like we can solve anything by talking about it anyway. Nothing can solve your mother." Jean tossed back her almost full drink and got up abruptly to go to the kitchen and refill her glass. "You still interested in going out for dinner?" Robin called after her. "Yeah, I was thinking ram's horn or something like that," Jean called back. Robin could hear the cork of the vodka pop out of the bottle. "Well, then you better not plan on getting ripped," he teased. Jean reappeared with a fresh drink and another beer for Robin as well. She sat it on the table next to his still half-full bottle and grabbed a few chips. They made a satisfying crunch in her mouth. "Yeah, you know me, drunk and disorderly at the Ram's Horn every Saturday night," Jean joked back at him. "Well, you'd probably fit right in at the Horn," Robin laughed. "What? Bite your tongue. The drunks don't go to the Horn until the Hamlin pub closes for the night," Jean smiled. Jean's chair was facing the front window and the drapes were open. Through the smudged-looking glass, she saw Connor walking, hands stuffed in his pockets, looking at the ground towards his house. He stopped for a moment in front of the Randalls' house and seemed to look straight at Jean, but she knew he probably couldn't see her because of the way the light hit the glass from outside. She thought he looked kind of sad. "I hope it's not Connor who's been playing the knocking game on our door," she said to Robin, just as the Tigers got a third out and the crowd cheered. It was an away game against the Cardinals. "Me too," Robin said. "Speaking of games, I don't think we're going to pull this one off today. 2 more innings, but they're up by like 10. We need a new shortstop. Jeez." Robin chugged the remaining beer and picked up the fresh bottle, holding it on his knee. He patted the seat next to him on the couch. "Hey, why don't you come over here next to me?" he offered coyly, as Jean's cell phone rang in her purse hanging on the back of one of the dining room chairs. "In a second," she said as she got up to answer the phone. It was Mort. Normally, she didn't answer during games, but Mort had priority over baseball. Jean answered the phone. Robin muted the game and listened to her end of the conversation. "Hey, Mort." "No, I'm not busy. Just having a drink and watching the game with Robin, yeah." "He got home Friday." "Yeah, I'm glad he's home too." "Sure, that works just fine. We were going to go down to Ramshorn later. You want to join us? We can discuss the details over dinner." "Great. See you in a bit, then." And she hung up the phone. As she walked back into the living room, Robin was looking at her expectantly. Well, what was that all about? Is he coming over here now? "Yeah, well, in about an hour, to look at the paintings. Then he's going to go to dinner with us," Jean explained. "Well, thank God we're only going to the Horn. You know the way he eats, and since we invited, you know he's going to expect me to pay," Robin said, half joking, half not. Mort was a portly man, and the only thing he enjoyed more than a free meal was selling art. Jean laughed. "I'm going to go up to the studio and arrange the paintings for him." Drink in one hand, she swiped a handful of chips from the bowl before kissing Robin on the tip of his nose and disappearing up the stairs. "Okay," he said as he turned the volume back up on the game. The Cards had just scored 3 more runs off a missed throw from the outfield. "Aw, come on, fellas. You got holes in your gloves or what?" he yelled at the screen. Upstairs, Jean let out a short, quiet laugh at her husband as she closed herself in her studio. She sat her drink on a table and considered the most recent painting, complete and drying on the easel. As she crunched on the chips one by one, it was finally finished, and she was pleased with it. She thought this series might be complete, but wasn't 100% sure just yet. She wanted to get Mort's feedback and sleep on it for a couple nights before she made a final decision. If Mort didn't like the paintings, it would kind of be a moot point. If he wasn't going to show them, she wouldn't need to start a new series she would need to start a new series ASAP. But even if she didn't need but even if she needed to start a new series, if she decided this series wasn't finished, she would continue to work on it for her own satisfaction. She was more excited about this work than she had been about any of her other work in quite a few years. The excitement and newness of it all was refreshing. Jean finished her chips and wiped her hands on her backside before pulling the other complete paintings from the rack and placing them on the chair rail ledge Robin had installed for her last summer for just this purpose. She arranged them in chronological order of completion, knowing that Mort would most likely move them around to see different compositions next to each other. The first time they had reviewed a finished series together, she had been appalled when he started moving things around. But after the first exhibition, nearly sold out, hung in the order of Mort's choosing, Jean never challenged him again. Occasionally, she questioned his choices, and sometimes he used her suggested groupings. But Mort knew art, and he knew his clients, and Jean liked selling her work. Mort had been representing Jean exclusively in Michigan now for eight years. She had representation in a gallery in Boca Raton and one in Chicago as well, but neither of them sold the volume that Mort sold out of his Birmingham gallery, and last year he had even helped her get a piece placed at the DIA. It was her first piece in a museum, and after that, the Boston Museum of Fine Art had purchased 2 pieces, and a small public museum in Northern California did an exhibition of one of her biggest collector's collection of her work. It had given her work a push, which was part of what had made her decide to shift her composition recently. After talking with the curators in Boston and California, she decided to allow her work to evolve in a new direction, as both curators had mentioned about other artists to which they had compared her work. They had both made comments about how it was gratifying for many collectors to watch and support their favorite artist's growth. She was ready to do something a little different anyway. Mort had been more skeptical, so she was a little nervous about him finally coming over to see the new work. He had refused to come over and look at anything in progress like he normally did. He said something about not wanting to bias her process with his input. Once Jean had all the paintings placed, she stood, finishing her drink, looking at them. Glass now empty, she headed back down the stairs for a refill. Robin was dozing on the couch, feet up on the worn arm and his mouth open. The bowl of chips was empty. Jean picked up the empty bowl with and the one empty beer. His other beer was still about a quarter full, and headed to the kitchen. Just as she opened the vodka, there was a loud knock at the door. She heard Robin stir. "I'll get it," he said sleepily. "Okay, thanks," Jean called from the kitchen. She pulled another tumbler from the cabinet and mixed a vodka and seltzer for Mort too, and headed to meet the 2 men in the living room. As Robin predicted, the Tigers had lost, but only by 1 run. They had a rally in the last inning, and the Cards actually had to come back to win. When Jean entered the room, Robin had turned the TV on mute and was standing in the middle of the room laughing with Mort, who had a giant Band-Aid hanging loosely on his right cheek. Jean outstretched her arm, handing him a drink as she gasped at the spectacle. Mort took the drink without question and took a sip. "Well, what in the hell happened to your face? Did Leah finally smack you one?" Jean joked. Mort's wife, Leah, was always threatening to smack the smile off his face when he made off-color jokes in her presence. Everyone knew she didn't mean it, and Mort only made the jokes to get his wife's goat. "What's this?" Or, "What, this?" Mort made a grand gesture with his right arm and hand pointing to the bandage. "No, the crack in your ass. Yes, that." Jean laughed and held her glass up to cheers with Mort, who obliged her gesture. "No, I'd be missing half my face if Leah ever actually decided to give it to me. This is because I was at the doctor last week to look at a mole that was here and had to have it removed," Mort explained. "Ah, I see," Jean replied, shaking her head in understanding. Mort had a fair number of moles, and he had a few others removed from various spots over the years. "Was it serious this time?" Jean asked. "Well, let's just say I'm glad it's gone. They said they got it all, and I shouldn't have any more problems." "Well, good," Jean said. "Are you ready to see these paintings or what? The one on the easel is still drying, so don't touch it." "Most definitely, my dear. Let's have a looky-loo." Mort began to follow Jean, who was already headed for the stairs. Robin smiled. "Okay, you two, have fun. I'm going to finish my beer, and then when you're done, we can head to the Horn," he called after them as they disappeared up the stairs. "Sounds like a plan," Mort laughed. "I'm famished." Robin chuckled to himself and sat back down on the couch to finish his beer and watch post-game commentary. Jean opened the door to the studio and ushered Mort in before her, then closed the door behind them. The routine went like this. Neither spoke. Mort would spend 5 or 10 minutes looking over the work and rubbing his chin and holding his elbow. Then he would look Jean up and down with scrutiny before rearranging the order of the work. Then he would look at it again for 5 to 30 minutes, and they would leave the room to discuss the work. Mort stood in the middle of the room with his drink in one hand and his other hand over his mouth for a moment. Then he left the room, closing the door and leaving Jean by herself, confused. Then he opened the door abruptly and burst into the studio once more, stopping once again in the center of the room. Then he walked from piece to piece and inspected the images with his face only a mere foot from the surface. When he had done this to each painting, he slammed what remained of his drink and set the glass down with a thud on the table next to her palette, exclaiming, "Mazel tov!" Grabbed both of Jean's hands and kissed the tops of her knuckles. Jean was in a state of shock. Mort had never had such a reaction to her work. He pat her on the shoulder and said, "Come, let's go have dinner and talk about this wonderful new work of yours, my dear." Jean let out a laugh, and Mort did the same as they headed back down the stairs. Robin popped up off the couch and pulled his keys from his pocket. "I'll drive," he announced. "That's okay. I'm going to follow you there because I need to get straight home after dinner. Leah made a pie and is insistent I have a piece or 3 before I go to bed." Jean was relieved. She wanted to tell Robin about Mort's reaction before they sat down. Mort probably knew this and wanted to give them their privacy. Jean knew Leah never baked. Last time she had a party at the house, she had asked Jean to bake a cake because she said the closest she got to baking was a potato pancake, and Mort always accepted when Robin offered to drive. Plus, he'd have to come back this way to go home anyway. Jean grabbed her purse from the dining room chair while Robin ushered Mort to the door. Jean was almost giddy getting into the Grand Cherokee. Robin knew something was up. Once they were out of the driveway and Mort was in line behind them, Robin couldn't take the suspense anymore. "So tell me, what's this all about?" Robin was as excited as Jean and didn't know why. "Well, he looked at them for just a couple minutes with his mouth open, as wide as a bagel, then darted out of the room. Then burst back in, then spun around and kissed both my hands after slamming his glass down and declaring Mazel tov. Then he pat me on the shoulder and wanted to go to dinner to talk about it." Jean sounded like a teenager telling her best friend the star baseball player had asked her to the prom. "Well, that funny man," Robin exclaimed with a chuckle. "He really is something. His wife hardly cooks, let alone bake, if I remember correctly, right?" "Yeah, I think he just knew I'd be excited to tell you," Jean laughed with her husband. "Well, that's good news." Robin let out a heavy breath. "You're telling me," Jean replied in a high-pitched voice. "I was prepared to start a new series, but still work on this one in my spare time, for my own gratification." "Oh, yeah, all that spare time of yours. Were you planning to not talk to me at all anymore?" Robin joked. Jean smacked him on the thigh as they turned onto Hamlin and pulled into the Ramshorn parking lot. "Hey, a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do," she laughed as he pulled into a space near the door. Mort pulled in next to them in the handicap spot and hung a blue placard in the rearview mirror. "Where'd you get that?" Jean asked Mort, pointing to the placard as they got out of their cars. "Oh, it happens when you get older, dear. The doctor said I need to be careful how much I walk out in the sun. He really wants me to wear a wide-brim hat, but hats have never been my style. The only time I put anything on my head is for weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs. I refuse to go to any more bris. Last one I went to, the moil had a cold sore." Mort laughed and rushed to the door to open it for Jean and Robin. Robin looked at Jean quizzically. He had no idea what a moil was. Jean mouthed the words, "I'll tell you later," as they entered the diner. The hostess at the register just inside the door looked bored, even though the restaurant was busy. They were lucky, though. There was no one in line, and one booth was open in the far corner. "How many?" the girl of about 16 in an old-school-style waitress uniform asked. 3, Robin responded, looking from Jean to Mort. The girl pulled 3 menus from a wall-mounted basket and turned away from them, saying, "Follow me," which they did. Before she smacked the menus down on the table, the girl turned to the party of 3 and asked, "Coffee?" Jean looked from Robin to Mort, who both shook their head in a yes gesture before turning to the girl, shaking her head, saying, "Yes, 3, please." The girl nodded in the same bored fashion as the rest of her communication and turned to the table. She slapped the menus at the end of the booth and reached across the table, turning 3 coffee cups at 3 place settings upright and removing a 4th unneeded place setting with coffee cup. Then she turned back to Jean. "Someone will be right over." "Okay, thank you, young lady," Mort offered. The 3 piled into the booth. Robin sat next to Jean and Mort across from her. Robin handed the laminated trifold menus, damp with bleachy-smelling water, to Jean and Mort before opening one for himself. "Well, I know what I'm having," Robin announced. "What's that?" Mort asked, placing narrow reading glasses on his face and peering down his nose at his menu. "The chicken sub with fries. It's a classic. And after, maybe a slice of banana cream pie," Robin said decisively, smacking the menu shut and placing it on the table in front of him. "Well, I'm going to have the taco salad. The pie is all you, Rob. Anyone interested in splitting some cheese sticks with me?" Jean smiled, folding her menu shut and lowering it to watch Mort agonize over all the options. "Yeah, I'll help you with that," Robin told her enthusiastically. "Me too," Mort chimed in. "Now, what do I feel like?" he said, tapping the fingers of his right hand on the table. I think I'll start with a bowl of cabbage soup, then have the chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and gravy. And Robin, if you're really going to have that pie, I think I will too." Mort smiled as he folded his menu and placed it in front of him as a waitress not much older than the hostess approached the table with 3 glasses of water in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. Her short auburn hair was combed just so, and her acrylic manicure was decorated with airbrushed dolphins and palm trees, a funny choice for Rochester Hills, Michigan, even in the summer. She sat the coffee pot on the edge of the table while she distributed the glasses of water. Then she picked up the steaming pot by the brown handle and filled the 3 upright mugs. Then, with a placid smile, she nodded at Robin and said, "I'll be right back to take your order." "Oh, okay, thank you," Jean answered. "Did you get a look at those nails?" Robin excitedly whispered to Mort and Jean as the girl walked away. "Yes, maybe I'll ask her who does them so I can offer them a show," Mort goaded. "Oh, stop it, you two. Leave her alone. I thought they were fun," Jean reprimanded as the waitress approached again. She was smirking. When she reached the table, she stopped and shifted her weight to her right hip and pulled a pad of order tickets and a pen out of her left pocket. Still smirking, she looked at the men. "Yeah, I know my nails are ridiculous, but it got you talking, and that means a high probability of a higher tip. This is my job, and I aim to please. Now, what can I get for you?" She seemed pleased with herself, and Jean covered her mouth to stifle a laugh as Robin and Mort both blushed in embarrassment. It's getting sunny out here. "I'll have the taco salad with extra sour cream and salsa on the side. Oh, and can I have an order of cheese sticks with marinara to start?" Jean ordered. "Sure. Anything besides coffee and water?" the waitress asked. "No." "And for you, sir?" The waitress looked at Mort. "I'll start with a bowl of that delicious cabbage soup, then the chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and extra gravy." The waitress interrupted Mort. "Extra gravy is $1.50. Is that okay?" she asked. Yes, I'm not paying tonight." Mort looked at Robin and laughed. "On the side?" the waitress inquired. No, put it all on there. Oh, and don't forget to come and ask about dessert later," Mort instructed. "Not a problem." The waitress smiled and turned to Robin, who was waiting his turn patiently. "And for you, sir?" she asked. "I'll have the chicken sub with fries," Robin replied. "Anything else?" the waitress asked the table. "We're probably going to want dessert," Robin told her. "Okay, cheese sticks will be up shortly," the waitress said and turned back toward the kitchen. Robin couldn't take the suspense any longer. He took a sip of his coffee, looking at Mort, who was stirring some cream into his, then tapped the spoon on the rim of the thick stoneware mug. "So what you think of Jean's new stuff, you old goat?" he asked affectionately. Mort looked at Robin intently as he took a calculated sip of his coffee. Then he slowly set the mug down in front of him and arranged his place setting just so, smoothing the napkin on his lap before he looked at Jean and back to Robin. "I fucking love it. It's going to sell out," Mort said a little too loud. A proper church-looking family at an adjacent table turned abruptly to glare at them disapprovingly over their shoulders. Mort stuck his tongue out at them and laughed. Robin and Jean smiled. Well then. Just a couple more chapters here. Andy Warhol. So, in writing this, I was thinking a lot about character comparisons and about commonality between people who seem very different. And I'm talking specifically here now about comparing, there's comparison between Robin and his mother and Mohan and his mother. So they're kind of foils of each other, right? They have very similar dynamic and have similarities, but they're also different. And you know, how is it that you have one mother who's so obnoxious, right? And has a son who has an honest job. You have another mother who is just as obnoxious and has a son who is involved in crime. And then these are also foiled by the relationship of Pat and Connor, and Gertrude and Connor, right? So I was looking at all of these familial relationships and exploring those differences. It's just something to keep in mind when you're listening to the story and considering the characters. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying it. There's only one or two more chapters left, so the next installment will be the last one.